Welcome to the second session of Directional Transient Ground Fault. In the first video, we have discussed about one of the type of sensitive ground fault, and that is the Directional Transient Ground Fault. We discussed what the relay does when there is no transient ground fault and what the data the relay receives from the instrument transformers. We learned that the relay continuously takes the values of instantaneous zero sequence voltage and instantaneous zero sequence current from the instrument transformers by the calculation or measuring method. And these values continuously are sampled at the rate of 8 kilohertz, and it is the sampled values or the signals are supplied to another blocks, and each one of these blocks are going to be discussed, and we will discuss each one by one. The first block was discussed, which we called it as block A in the first video. And we discussed that what this block does, it is finding of the T0 or the exact time of happening of transient ground fault. Another block which the sampled values are supplied. When this A block detects the transient ground fault at the time of T0, then it gives a signal of, for example, 1 to another block of SR latch in the S terminal. Then when S terminal is supplied with a high value of 1, and it gives an output on the Q, and this terminal is, we know that Q dash. This value is supplied. Then these values, the Q which gets high, then it is supplied to another blocks. Important block in our discussion in this session is the direction and determination block. This block determines the direction of transient ground fault. And we already understood that the sampled value of instantaneous zero sequence current is directly supplied to the direction determination block. Now the direction determination block, which we call it as a second block or B block, we call it block B. What this block does is determining the direction of the transient ground fault. It determines the direction of ground fault, which happens. Now it has the voltage input and the current input. It means zero sequence voltage input, zero sequence current input. It has, now it should determine the direction of the fault which happened. Now let's discuss how this block works. Suppose that we have a system, and in this system we already install CTs and PDs, and the CT value, the relay calculates 3I0 from the CT and V0 from the PD. And in this condition, consider on phase A fault is occurred. Then in this condition, we know that the positive sequence voltage phasor A1, VA1, VB1 and VC1 in the normal condition. And the fault during the fault, for example, VA0 becomes VA1 becomes around 0 in the resistive fault, in the type of resistive fault. The V0, it means zero sequence voltage, becomes almost in the reverse direction of VA1. It means the positive sequence voltage. So the V0 becomes negative in direction, and almost in the phasor becomes in negative side in the purely resistive fault. So we consider our system to be purely resistive, and we assume that V0 becomes in opposite direction. The polarity becomes changed from the positive to the negative. So in this condition, if we calculate the W0P, means the power, the zero sequence power, the active part of the zero sequence power. That is the multiplication of 3I0 and V0. And if you consider the active part, the active power, the active zero sequence power, then we should consider the I0 and V0, the active part of these two components. If we calculate in the purely resistive fault, then if any fault is in the forward direction, then the W0P becomes negative. So if the value of calculation of the W0P becomes negative, the relay can understand that the fault is in forward direction. These all are done by the block we called as a block B. The block B calculates the zero sequence power, the active part of zero sequence power, and gives a signal to this part. Now this switch, for example, is under control of the block. We call it as block C. Now, on the next session, we are going to learn what the block C does and how it operates, how it allows or disconnects the signal sent by the direction determination block.